You all right there guys, this is Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft, and today we're taking a look at Storm Force Airsoft in Rugeley. Now, if you've not seen one of my video reviews before, the way I always do is I put YouTube annotations up on either side of me, so if you're watching this on a PC, you can click those and it'll skip ahead to the part of the video that you're most interested in. Now, I want to point out before we get started, this is a first impressions review. I've never been to this site before the day I turned up on, and so everything I'm going to talk about just now reflects my experiences of that one day when I turned up. And so with that out of the way, we'll dive straight on with the review. So the site's located next to Longhorn Farm in the Woodlands nearby it, near Rugeley, on a road called Bardy Lane. Now if you're using the postcode that is posted up on the website, I've listed it in the description down below if you want to navigate to the site using it, it's going to drop you off at the actual farmhouse itself. You need to go a little bit along Bardy Lane to find the actual site entrance. I'm just going to throw up this image from Google Maps just here, and I've highlighted the route of where Bardy Lane is, where the sat nav's going to drop you off, and where the actual car park and safe zone for the site is. As you'll see, there is a short walk from the car park to the site itself. This is just because on the day I turned up, the fields were quite waterlogged, so they put down this specific lane of hardcore for people to park their cars on, and you had a short walk from the car park to the site zone itself, just because they didn't want people's cars parking on the field and then getting bogged down in mud and everything. So whilst it was a short walk from the car park to the site, there was this little quad bike going back and forth between all day, and that was like ferrying people's gear to and from the cars, so you didn't have to walk across the entire fields with it, which was quite a nice thing for them to do. Once you actually get to the main site itself, you just wander straight on through the gates. You'll see all the huts and everything. There are 3 separate areas for setting up your gear in the safe zone. Just grab a bench space and start setting up your gear. So in terms of site prices, the walk-on fee is £20 if you're a member and £25 if you're not. If you're needing a hire kit, then £45 is going to set you up with whatever you might need from their armoury on site. Now I say armoury because it actually deserves the title. I'm throwing up an image here of what it is when you walk on the site there, and if you just look, there's a sheer vast selection of different high guns you can pick from. You've got G36s, MP5s, shotguns, a lot of things, including handguns as well. And so I was speaking to the guys on site about this, and their philosophy was, if you're a new player to the sport, you're going to want to pick something that you think's cool and not get handed just some crummy second-hand gun as your high thing as an introduction. If you want to bring people into the sport, you need to impress them. And I can't help but agree with that kind of philosophy on there. I found that armoury very impressive. There is also hot food on site, which is included as part of your walk-on fee. It came in the form of soup and a bread roll, which was a little bit underwhelming, but I was speaking to the guys about that. They're trying to get better hot food onto the site. They're just trying to figure out a workaround for it at the moment. As I said earlier, there are 3 separate areas for setting up your kits in the safe zone itself. You just grab some bench space and you can start setting up your gear there. There's also bathrooms on site and a very impressive shooting range out the back where you could go and test fire your guns. They've got targets at varying distances off in the woodland, and that's where the chronoing's done as well. So overall, with the sheer amount of facilities on site, I was thoroughly impressed by what they've got. So how about the staff on site? Well, when I first turned up, they were very welcoming and talkative. It was good to see that they were actually engaging with a lot of the players, and there was a very good-natured atmosphere about the place. It was very obvious as an outsider to see that they genuinely cared whether people were having a good time or not. During the games, you could always quite easily find a marshal throughout the game site. The problem is it's quite large though, and so it wasn't uncommon to find yourself engaging an enemy and there wasn't a marshal in sight, or they were just simply too far away to have a good understanding of what was going on. So whilst they tried their best obviously to keep a rein on the games, you can wander into areas where there's no supervision whatsoever, but considering the sheer size of the site involved, that's not really surprising. What about the players then? Well, during the games themselves, there was the 1 or 2 instances of non-hit taking, no more so than I've experienced at any other site that plays airsoft in up and down the country. But when I actually showed my evidence of this to the marshals, they took it seriously, had a word with the guys that involved, done, matter resolved. So it was really nice to see that they actually took it seriously and then resolved the matter quite quickly and effectively. As for the rest of the players, I did actually notice during the games that there was very little in the way of cheat calling or bad mouthing as it was going on. It was all quite a good natured atmosphere. Like, you'd have a good back and forth between players, like the dead guys, the alive guys, regardless of what team they're on. So this did have a really nice atmosphere there to the place, which as a new person is always good to see. You don't want to turn up to a new site and find it's all like really stony and everybody's taking it way too seriously, that kind of thing. This was not this site. It was obvious that everyone was there, was enjoying themselves and there to have a laugh. So for the most part, the terrain on site is virgin woodland with quite a high number of high quality structures and fortifications dotted around the map. These can range from anything from a church to a fire support base, some pillboxes, like a checkpoint with a little barrier thing. I like that, it's a nice touch. And like a Land Rover with a refueling station in it, that sort of thing. For the most part, the site actually I found myself very much reminded of Ground Zero as I was playing through it. It's that kind of terrain. It had the similar kind of large rody bushes in the middle of the map that, whilst they do have some dedicated paths carved through them, you can just dive into these bushes, vanish, and then pop out on another side of the woodland. And so it was great for flanking around or hiding from other enemies and then getting the drop on them when they're not expecting it. For the rest of the site, mainly the north and west areas of it, it was very quite open. Like there were thick trees you could hide behind, so there was cover there. But the ground was very free of detritus. You could just sprint for miles, and you could really surprise people by how quickly you can cover the ground on there. So I particularly enjoy this because it really allows you to close the distance on targets, and you can surprise them by how quick you can move. But of course, this is a double-edged sword. You can easily find that players that aren't paying attention will quickly get overwhelmed by a team that just moves so fast. I personally really like this terrain. It was quite freeing to have such an open space and have so many options to get around and attack certain objectives. You weren't limited in the way you had to attack these. So I personally really enjoyed it, and I can't see why other people who are into their woodland gameplay wouldn't like it either. So in terms of actual game types on the day then, if you're expecting some short, fast game types where you can reload and have plenty of rest in between, this isn't what was happening. There were very long game types on the day, and so I had to actually go back to the safe zone twice during the first game just to reload because it was stretching on for that length of time. And whilst I'm not particularly averse to long game types, if you're the kind of person that prefers short, fast-paced action, perhaps not for you. But for the first game, what we were doing was a sort of land grab situation where there were 10 bases dotted around the map, and they all had these red-blue flagpoles on a bit of rope, and you just pulled the rope and it changed what colour flag was showing. So the main objective was to have as many flags of your team's colour flying by the end of the game. But whilst this was going on, if you went back to your main base, you could find secret secondary objectives, such as collecting jerry cans from certain bases, taking a bundle of dynamite and blowing up another one, or finding a downed pilot, that sort of thing. And I don't think this game played out the way anyone expected it to. The Reds were all going around in one giant group, and they were just smashing the blue team whenever they came with them because they were just had such overwhelming numbers. But so it seemed like the Reds were winning for the entirety of the game. But whilst this was going on, there was only one or two blues on the opposite side of the map, changing all the bases the Reds had previously gone to back to blue. So even though the Reds got all the secondary objectives, there were 7, 8 out of 10 of the bases that were showing blue colours by the end of it, and the Blues actually won that, even though it seemed like they were losing for the majority of it. So that was pretty damn funny. The second game was a escort mission. It was an attack and defend kind of scenario whereby the attackers had to escort this artillery gun and had to go down the main path throughout the site, and it could not deviate from this path. The attackers themselves could go anywhere, so you can attack from whatever angle you feel like. You weren't limited on that as long as the artillery gun stayed on its fixed path. So this was an interesting one. So the attackers could do whatever they like and try and beat back the Blues, but they needed to bring that artillery gun with them, otherwise they wouldn't win. And so if you camped that artillery gun, then it doesn't matter where the other team went, you would hold the objective. You couldn't move it back, but you could secure it. There were one or two minor improvements I'd like to suggest for this game. The first is based around the respawn system that was in play throughout the entirety of the day. The way it would work is that your first shot you could be medicked, and your second shot you could be medic as well, but it had to be by someone who was different from the person who medicked you the first time. Now this process could repeat an unlimited amount of time, so theoretically you would never have to respawn. You only have to go to respawn after a set amount of time has passed and you bleed out. Once that bleed out has happened, you can go to various points dotted around the map, these yellow posts, where you can respawn in. Now, for the first game, this worked brilliantly because you could go around as a group, and it kind of lent a sort of survivability to the players, so you could gain progress as you were going around the map. But for the attack-defend thing, I don't personally think the defenders should have had this role, because it gave a sort of advantage. Yes, you can't have the same person medic you, but if you just get a group of 3, and you position yourself in a really nice spot, you can just constantly alternate how you medic in, and that'll keep the group alive kind of thing. So it was very hard for attackers to gain any momentum because it's very hard to dislodge those defenders. What I'd prefer to see for that kind of game is a one-hit medic, second hit fall back to a specific point, and you can't advance further from that. That way it'd be possible for attackers to slowly clear out the defenders and get momentum and still push. The game then wouldn't be, can the attackers do it? The game would be, how quickly can the attackers do it? And because as the team swapped on the third game, the attackers couldn't go anywhere. It just stagnated completely because they couldn't kill the guys fast enough before the reinforcements came back in. So that was something that I'd suggest would add a little bit more momentum to that game. Also, have the attackers do the same route. The first were attacking downhill, the second was attacking uphill, and I think uphill was much harder because of the way the cover was set out. It was a lot harder to get artillery gun up the hill when you're being fired down from above kind of thing. So, 2 minor tweaks to that little game that I thought perhaps would improve it slightly. Also, with the first game and the respawn system, you need to make clear where you can respawn from and where you can't. Because there were occasions where I was wandering through the site and I couldn't find a safe respawn point. There were always enemy team members lurking nearby, and so it wouldn't be right to respawn right next to them. And this included when I went back to our main base and the enemy team was sitting right there. Granted, they couldn't stay for a length of time, the marshal was moving them along, but you still had to wait a couple of minutes in your own main base where you couldn't respawn. So a little bit of tweaking needed to that, I think, just to stop people aimlessly wandering around the site for a while. Other than that, though, I really quite enjoyed the game types. I managed to get a lot of good kill streaks going, and you weren't sitting out the game for any particular length of time because the bleed out time was short, or you have someone nearby who can medic you back in. So I never found myself bored, which is a crucial thing when you're designing game types. So ultimately then, is Storm Force Airsoft worth a visit? Well, I personally really enjoyed my time there. It felt instantly familiar to me as a site because of how relatable I found it to Ground Zero. The terrain was shockingly similar in cases, so it was very easy for me to get to grips with it and where I needed to go. I particularly love how there was several different flavours of woodland types available, so if you wanted your very slow-paced, sneaky, crawling through dense undergrowth things, you've got that in the middle of the map. Or if you're the kind of person that prefers to sprint off into the distance as fast as it can and get around flanking angles, you can do that around the edges of the site. So if there's one particular thing that wasn't to your playstyle, there was another section of the woodland that just was. Lunch was a little bit underwhelming. They are improving it, but on the day I was a little bit disappointed with that. There was the minor hit-taking issue, but that's to be expected of any site, really, and it was no more worse than any other place I've been to. And obviously there were the little tweaks to the game types that I've just previously suggested, but other than that, it was extremely hard to try and find faults with this site. I really liked how they just have everything you could possibly need there, and they were really quite welcoming, and it was a good experience as a first player to turn up there. You never know what to expect when you turn up to a site for the first time, and it's good to see that they really nailed it on the head when I turned up for this one. So I personally have no trouble recommending Storm Force Airsoft to anyone at all. Now, I really hope you've enjoyed my video review of Storm Force Airsoft in Rugeley. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask, maybe you'd like to share your own experiences of time on the site, just leave it in the comments section down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And until next time, this has been Dale of Lone Wombat Airsoft.